Hello, welcome to the Byte Club's Talk Night Part 3. Here we're with Gandalf, also known as Paige, and I think I'll let you introduce yourself if you'd like.
Alrighty. Well, my name's Paige. I'm from New Brunswick. I'm an independent developer at the moment. I haven't really thought out a studio name yet for myself, and mostly I just at the moment Gandalf Soda is just the account for like gaming with my like friends and whatnot. So I've been thinking of a proper one, like a proper official studio name. Plus, also I think Gandalf is copyrighted. But I've been working on a game by myself since about April in the Unity engine, and originally I have had the plans to work on this game for a while because I had made similar builds like using different engines like in Unreal, but it just didn't fizzle out. It didn't work, so it fizzled out. And so but now I've gotten to a point where it's like in a pretty good spot, and I'll just like present it now and I can just do a little quick walkthrough, and all that really needs to be done to the game at the moment is just filling out the map. I have like a design for the map, but I haven't drawn most of the sprites. But you just have your basic like I have no volume yet, but I have my menu set up and I've got like my eight directional walking. So I've got instead of using the Unity animator, which I found was quite ridiculous, I had set up code following like a tutorial when I first was getting the hang of it, like leaving that student like mindset and trying to become like more resourceful. I started out with a lot of tutorials. So he's got eight directional movement, and I've got like a run button. I might add animations for like the run, but that's a lot of like extra work. But you can talk to NPCs where it's like, hello, this is a test for the dialogue system. It pauses when there's punctuations. You can choose different options, like you said yes, and then like when you come back and talk to them, they're like, "Oh, I'm done my conversation." So I have a branching system, so it's like set up currently for like various, conversations you could probably have with like a character, like talking about like their day, how like it's all been going and whatnot. Because I have a story plan where it's like, I mean, you're a dinosaur and we have the academy, but I haven't really set it up much. I've set up the room transitions. I've got a couple sprites in, so you got like some lockers, but you kind of just it's a little blank at the moment because I worked on most of the code for like the game and just trying to get that wrapped up. So like welcome to the school. It's currently a work in progress. Unfortunately, I forgot to sprite doors, so I didn't add any of the rooms. And so that's about it. You can skip dialogue, you can just run over here. And there's also combat. So the enemies are kind of like the earthbound system where they like will follow you around, and so you can like run away from them and they'll like stop if you get too far from them, and they have like the directional movement. You can pick up items, but if they catch you, you enter combat. And so like you can just it's kind of a rudimentary turn-based combat where it's like you just hit attack every turn. You can or they will use magic attacks, and it's like a waste of your resources because I haven't really programmed in anything useful. You can use items, so you can consume that apple and it will heal you during battle. And then basically, if you're, because I haven't scaled it well, so normally I just run from the battle. And then once the battle's done, the guy disappears and it resets. Oh, that's actually a bug. That didn't work. That was working in my Unity build, but it's supposed to reset. Oh well.
Oh no.
Basically, I have it set up so there's like there can only be one enemy at the time, but there's multiple different types of enemies via scriptable objects. And I've just basically been building out the world, and it hasn't been set up much yet for like exploring yet because I've only been like slowly spriting the stuff as I go along. Like I've added a couple more house sprites, and then basically my plan is once I fill out the map, I'll add more like teleporting because right now you can only teleport to the school, and so like you can just like explore the map at the moment and talk to my one NPC and stare at this lovely fountain I animated. So I've drawn all the sprites by hand, but other than that, right now it's just a tech demo really because I wanted to work on the combat and get the dialogue system set up, and there's also like an inventory system set up so you can like consume the apple to heal. And if I press uh forgot the button for stats actually. What was it? Open stats menu. Now that I think about it, that overwrites my S button with my controls. Oh well.
It's kind of the stuff you notice when you're testing it or when you show other people. That's what I noticed when I used to play
Yeah,
games with friends.
yeah, I completely forgot. Well, the stats menu was just like it's also just it was there mostly for debugging purposes, but like it you can equip items so you can like buy an apple from the guy and it wastes money. You're supposed to also get gold from like beating enemies in combat, but I'm not very good at my own combat because I haven't like scaled it properly. But you can sell items, and so I sold all three of the apples that I bought. You eventually you will be able to talk to the NPCs. I just haven't wrote anything. Whoops. And yeah, so I've got an empty inventory. I keep
It's a
pressing escape to
great
escape.
NPC model there. I love
Yeah,
him.
this one here or the default
No, the
one?
default one.
Yeah, I kind of like I was like for the longest time I just had the sprites for like my main guy was like the only sprite in the map, and I was like, well, like it was kind of weird having a bunch of like clones walking around. But like I think actually here there was one of my items that I had set up was a bat, which I was supposed to pick up a weapon to show that I could equip it. But I think actually when the enemy was walking by and he was chasing me, I think he picked it up. So I might need to change that code, but other than that, that's like the fundamental basics of my game because I've focused on like doing the core stuff first, and I wanted to get like people to like, play test it, and then slowly work on making like the story, stuff like that.
That's
So
really
that's
cool. Yeah, I actually love all the hand drawn parts you've made as well. The NPCs, all the sprites, like the NPC that you have a sprite for. The fountain is so cool.
yeah, because like it was it's really hard. It was something completely different than what I'm used to. Because most of the time I found I was drawing pixel art for like fun, and that's not to say that drawing stuff for this game wasn't fun. But I mean, normally I wouldn't draw like assets, and surprisingly, it took me a long time to figure out how to draw like, like the trees, for example. Because like currently, like one thing which I had a really annoying problem with was I wanted to have it so that the player could like walk behind the tree. Right now you can't do that because I the way I have it set up for collision,
Yeah,
and it had some clipping issues. But I also haven't added borders to the world, but I plan on doing it, and you can kind of see how I tested that out here with some sprites of like a basically I spent like at least like a day or so just trying to make tree sprites that would like continuously loop, right? So I could make a nice like wall, and there will be water animation soon. I just haven't added that in because I'm not too sure how to animate Unity tiles compared to Game Maker, because Game Maker is the only experience I have with animating tile sets compared to a game object like the fountain. But I have a couple buildings like planned, like everything I drew myself. Where's the it's
that's
the good old
amazing though.
library.
Oh my god,
Yeah, yeah,
it's
like
really
the
cool to see
buildings.
like your passion for like making these pixel arts kind of put into tech demo for now. It's really cool.
Yeah, because like in my opinion, I found the thing which bothers me about the game development, and I don't know if it's because I am like an artist, but even right now, I know it's a bit bland because like I haven't like completely like painted out the world. Like I have like a map which I've drawn out, but there's like so many sprites I need to do, which is like because I have like benches and lampposts and stop signs just to add a bit of decor, but I also need to make like some enemy sprites and like their walk animations, and then also the interiors of like houses and like the furniture and all the stores, and then like like classrooms for the school. But like now that I've gotten to a point where I at least have the basics of a world set up, like, like there's water, there's bridges, there's like the roads, it feels a lot better to work inside this game. Because my problem is I hate using placeholder assets. Because, like, it doesn't really feel like a game when you're like working just with like squares and like triangles for like the longest time. Like, even if got like the core mechanics down play, because from when I was working on the combat, which still needs a bit of like tweaking, obviously, because there is a couple bugs I know of. There is this one bug where if you run and you talk, oh, I fixed that bug. But if you run and talk for the longest time, he would just slide off the map because he would keep moving. So, but there's like a bunch of funny bugs like that, and it's kind of hard to like feel like you want to work on the game when there's like nothing that you can look at that looks nice. So now that it's like almost there, it's got like I just need to do the last couple of like spriting for everything, like make all the decor nice and pretty. It just feels a lot more like invigorating, I think, to work on it, because now I'm like, this feels like a proper thing you could show someone instead of like, hey, look at my like bunch of squares. Hey, there's a bunch of code I've worked on for like months behind it, but it doesn't look that appealing yet. You just gotta wait?
Yeah, I think that showing off some of your stuff is really important as well. So you said it took you about 6 months, you said, to get to this point? Or
Yeah, cause like it sounds like, in my opinion, obviously there's like people who could like churn something out like this in like a couple of maybe even like a month. But for me, it was quite a learning process because like when I was leaving school, like most of the time I wasn't really thinking about like writing the code like myself. Like normally my go-to was to like look at the books like that are like look at the textbooks, look at tutorials online on like YouTube or like whatnot, and then just kind of follow along mindlessly and like patchwork something together, which is kind of what I did originally with like the character, and like the inventory system was like based off of that and whatnot. Like it was based off a tutorial. But as I slowly got better at coding while working on this by myself, I ended up just basically writing everything by myself, like from memory and like just thinking of stuff, which feels weird because like I don't know how to explain it, but it feels like thinking of a solution to a problem for me just it doesn't, I'm not very good at it when it comes to like making the code. So I always like looked at like resources, like whether you look at the Unity documentation and whatnot, or like Stack Overflow, and then try and like piece together something from that. But then I realized like that's kind of like a way, like everyone has to do that eventually. Like even the most competent developers will have a bug that drives them crazy that they just can't like figure out the solution for, and eventually they'll just have to look up something or ask for help, right? So
I think, and Fernando said like he hates the first 6 months of working on a project. I don't blame you. I when I worked on the game that we had like a demo for, it was called Ascending Flags. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It wasn't really
I think I
popular.
have it.
It's yeah, it was for the game, one of the game jams last year. I worked with alongside a couple other developers on it, and I led with the team with another developer. It was really really cool, um, and it was a great learning experience for our first year. But I'm gonna say it right now, like that first 6 months, oh my god, I hated it.
Yeah, that's the thing with game development. It feels like, because it's hard to explain to like someone who like isn't really like into like game development, but it feels like every day it's just like a clock. It's like a metronome almost, where it's like one side I'm like on, oh my god, this is so awesome. I can't believe the project I'm making is like it's being realized right in front of my eyes, and the other half I'm like, oh my god, this is like terrible, right? Like, because there's been plenty of those days in that 6 months where it was like I spent like the whole day trying to fix a bug, and then I was like, I'm done. That was one thing I had to learn quickly, was like the best fix for like any bug is to just take a step away for the day and come back to it tomorrow when your like mind is like in a better headspace. I think about 90% of all the major bugs I've had I like was like, that's it, let's call it a day. Let's chill out, like I don't know, play some other games like as inspiration. Came back to it the next day, figured it out within 10 minutes.
I think one of the most important things when it comes to programming as a whole is that you got to remember it's a complete like the process of programming. You're not programming. You're learning programming. Even when you
Yeah.
write your own applications, when you write your own code, everything's a learning process, and that's what I felt like personally. A lot of professors and teachers that I had, they didn't get that as much. Like programming something is you're always learning something new along the way. The most competent C++ developer is still going to learn something new.
Oh
It could
yeah.
be from a different language. It could be another algorithm he figures out himself. So you're always learning something new. You never stop learning, and I think that's really important. And that's why stuff like Stack Overflow and even
Oh
Chat
yeah.
GPT, like getting ideas from them, I think that's definitely helping a lot of people kind of what's the word for it, thinning out that learning curve a lot when it comes to certain languages, being able to learn
Yeah.
faster. And I think a lot of professors especially should adapt to that more and kind of accept that uh, searching stuff up on Stack Overflow and that stuff is okay as long as they have the foundational knowledge. um, yeah, that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
um,
cuz like
yeah.
they have to like you have to figure out how to apply the stuff that you learn and like if like normally if like a Stack Overflow answer is like I feel like even if I have a problem and I look it up like what could be causing the problem on Stack Overflow, I learned something new because even when I was just making this build, because I haven't built like a proper build for the game yet. It's all just been pushed to GitHub. So this morning I was trying to figure out why I couldn't make a build, and it was giving me a bunch of errors. And I'm
Oh,
like, well,
those
that's kind of
ones.
weird because there is no errors at all when I run it. And I guess the solution was I just had two like scripts that I didn't use and they had syntax that was wrong, and because of that the game was like, no, we're not making this build. So like, and I only found that out via looking up on Stack Overflow like, oh, you might need to check if you have any unused scripts and get rid of them because they could be causing problems. I was like, really? That's kind of interesting. So
Yes.
even I didn't know that. Like,
Yeah. One of the most important things I think when I helped first build our game, one of the things I struggled with was sometimes if you have resharper, I think it is. I don't know why, but it defaulted to C sharp for me. I wanted it to be C++,
yeah,
but it didn't. Anyways, I decided to add a bunch of random includes in my scripts that were only bound to the editor. So there would be like editor, not gizmos, but like I can't remember what they were called, but they were like editor tools that you could basically draw. Very similar to how Gizmos works in Unity, where you can draw like
yeah,
shapes and that stuff. But they were only bound to the editor, so if you try to build with them, instead of deleting them for you, they would be like, "Hey, this exists in your script," and I'm like, "I didn't put it there," and it kept doing
yeah.
that, so that was annoying. It's all learning. So I think it's
Cause
kind of
like
cool.
even like what I chose to like develop first while working on the game, because I started with the inventory system first, then I worked on the dialogue, then I worked on the combat once I started doing the inventory system. But even like I don't know, like just even making the dinosaur cursor was something I just chose out of like the blue. Like it was just like something I felt that I wanted to add was like a cursor that responded to like the buttons here, like it highlights a different color. And so you kind of just as you're going along with an indie project it ends up
Yeah,
sorry.
we can't see your cursor.
Oh, you can't see
No,
the cursor.
it's you
Oh
have
man.
it if you yeah, okay, wait. Let me just pull it up here. There we go. Yeah, I can see it. And if you like click on something, I think it works. Or if you go back into Discord, it like showed up for us.
Oh, like this.
Yeah, and then you go back in the game for a second, we can see it. I think it's because you're sharing your
It must
app.
be because I'm sharing my screen and it must not maybe if I like share
If you share your
like
full
a win
screen, we'll be
yeah,
able to see it. But that's yeah, it's up to you.
let me do that because it felt kind of benign, but it was just something that I felt like I wanted to add. Like it was just something that was I don't know, when I was like making the code, I was like originally I didn't want to have it like, have a mouse capabilities cuz like most of my games that I used as inspiration, they kind of can you see the mouse now? Like the little guy?
Oh, I love him.
Yeah, because most of the RPGs I remember playing that I used as inspiration were like basically everything was used with the like every selection was done with like the keyboard and like the arrow keys like sliding through a list of things. But when I was first coding it I was like, I'm gonna code it with the mouse first, and then I'll code the keyboard implementation later. And I was kind of getting mad at how like the mouse was like, just the plain default mouse. And I didn't even know you can make a custom cursor, but I was just thinking about how like games like I don't know, like League of Legends has that custom cursor, or like a lot of like World of Warcraft, I believe does, where it's like games that use the mouse have like a custom fancy cursor. And I was like, I want one of those. So I feel like playing games kind of helped me develop my own game and all the other games that I've worked on. I could probably move on from showing Dinosaur Academy now and show one of my other games here. Because, like, a lot of. Okay, yes. I pu- Unknown publisher. I was the publisher of this game.
Yeah.
But
Happens.
one of the other games, this was a project. This is the only project I've done where it was with another person. It was a two-person project. It was me and my classmate Dylan, and basically the gist of this project Thicket was we had done a little project prior. It was like a group, like it was a class one, where it was like you had to make like a platformer in like a week, and we weren't proud of how like it came out. And the next project was like, make a game of your choice. And we're like, how about we make a better platformer? So he did most of the programming for this, but I did most of the assets. So, and also like he did most of the sound work, but I spent like hours just drawing all the assets and the animation. We took a lot of inspiration from Celeste, and Hollow Knight was the big deal for that. So like we've got like the Hollow Knight esque jump where he kind of like has the velocity
By
and
the way,
then
are
like
you
just a
sharing a
little
screen?
dash. Oh, I
You're
think I should be.
you're on Discord. You're sharing Discord.
Oh, my apologies. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I was like, you were talking, and I was like, this
I
sounds
don't know.
Ah,
Maybe
there
I'll
we
just
go.
like restart it, but the yeah, so I'm not the best at Discord, cause like I only really use it to talk to like my friends when like playing like Baldur's Gate or something. But yeah, it's like it's inspired by both like Hollow Knight. He took more inspiration from Hollow Knight for the mechanics, while I took more inspiration from like Celeste for the sprites. And so like here is like our damage. So basically, you get warped back if you hit the spikes, which makes this game really difficult because I'm not very good at it. And this is our like checkpoint, so like a little chime, and you're
I
supposed to
love
like
the
dash.
mushrooms. The mushrooms are so cool. I love that design.
Yeah, the funny thing about the mushrooms was originally we were going to have mushrooms be a bounce pad, and the goal was that like you would hop on it and then you get launched like super high. But the way that we programmed the jump, it would just like jump him up in the air, but it wouldn't like add that launch. So
Yeah.
we're like, we couldn't figure out the solution. So we just kind of left them in the game. So when you walk over them, it plays that animation. But the bounce pad, RIP, he didn't make it into the final cut. But like basically, it's a very tricky platformer because my friend spent forever building the level design, and I am horribly bad at this game. But because like you have to like dodge the spikes in order to like proceed, and you'll find yourself getting warped back a lot because he like what we did for when we were developing the game is we measured how far Thicket, we just called the little fox Thicket, how far he can jump and how long he can jump based on tiles that I had drawn. So we laid out like the different tiles and found out he jumps like, like 7 tiles high or something. And so he basically pinpointed the exact like teensy amount you could use in order to like make it through the jump. I'm not very good at this, and I don't have Unreal Engine on my computer anymore, so I can't like debug myself to the end. But so maybe I'll just stop trying to get through the level while explaining. But like that's one of the other projects I worked on with my friend, and this one's it feels the most complete because it's got like sounds and That I think this one took about a month, but that was like month, 2 months. But it was working like with a friend, which I find I'm not very good at like working well like in like bigger groups for like a game because I like having creative like control, but working in like smaller groups is pretty good for me because like I find I want to make sure everyone's like happy with the result of the game, and the more people you have like on a project, it can kind of get muddied, you know. So
I
it was just the two of us.
Yeah, I definitely think that size matters in even indie companies and that stuff. Like what you feel comfortable with, what your team feels comfortable with, and it sounds like you kind of found your balance through making these games as well, like in school and that stuff.
Yeah, cause like I'm still like pretty fresh out of school. Like it's only been like a couple months really since I've like been officially done. Cause like technically like the last courses for me ended in April around the time I started the project, and I was doing the and what we had to do is basically while we were building up to the end of our courses, we had to like try and find a contact or like in the industry for like an internship, which is part of like the graduation requirements. Was like we needed like 4 months of like full time work at like like under an internship, and I was looking everywhere, and it was really difficult for a lot of my like classmates and I to try and find some gigs because there isn't much even in the local area. Like even in Nova Scotia, there wasn't a lot for people, but eventually, funny enough, I was like looking for about a month, and then Fernando actually came in and did a presentation for his Team Hero Coder because we had to do a project related to, I think it was like, was it the net code? Like, I think it was like net code or like just basically scripting, and it worked really
Netcode.
well. Like, yeah, so we just had he had he came in and like he did his presentation of like Team Hero Coder, and I recognized that the game was kind of based off of the old Final Fantasy sprites with like the mages with like the hats that cover like their entire face, and they just have like the beady like two dots for like 2 pixels for their eyes. And I was like, oh, that's amazing. I love pixel art, and I like the Final Fantasy games even though I've like never played them except for 7. And so basically we got talking after the his presentation, and my internship that I did for the school was technically like underneath like Fernando. Like he basically supervised me working on Dinosaur Academy, checked in, kind of like an Obi-Wan Kenobi mentor-esque figure,
Yes, that's
so
very cool.
that's eventually what I ended up doing. And I know my friend who worked on me with this game, he ended up going to a company in Nova Scotia that worked on like mobile games. But I don't think game development is for him anymore because I've been talking to him and he's not a big fan. I forgot about that part.
I can see. Yeah, this game
Yeah.
sounds really cool though. I like how all the noises. It's not overwhelming when it comes to the music and that stuff. Like
Yeah.
you don't get really intense music during some parts of it, and I think that's what like a lot of games they struggle with as well. Or at least to me personally, I think a lot of games if they don't have the right music in them, the game will just feel flat. There won't be emotion in the game, or even if it's just the money to make money off of, you're not gonna or a game to make money off of. I don't know if I said game to make money off of or money to make money off
Yeah, it's
of.
fine. I've
Yeah. Um, but yes, I think it's like definitely important.
Cause like it's weird because cause like sound design, this is the only game I've added sound design because usually I think I add sound design last. There we go. I managed to get through it. But it's kind of like a hidden feature almost for like a player, cause like good like game design where it's like good mechanics that just feel right, like whether like Cuphead for example. Like I haven't played Cuphead, but like the mechanics of like the shooting and the jumping and like the dodging is all really tight knit, and I find as a player most players won't even notice like how well made something like that is, or like well made like how well made sound design can be and for a game. but most of the time people notice it when it's off or when it's bad, and it's kind of very hard to get in that tricky medium, of having like people notice like uh because it's very hard to like do sound design properly if like it feels so subliminal, if that makes sense,
Yeah, and yeah, I think Loft also said it's another thing with colors in movies since they can represent different morals and standpoints in stories.
Yeah,
I think it all kind of wraps together quite well. Um, and I've seen that. Like I have a friend actually who helped me make a game, or at least it was like half of a game because it was for a project we were doing. And he is an amazing like sound designer. He can make really good music, and some of the
yeah,
music he made was so like powerful. Like I felt uh what's the word for motivated. Like we had a
yeah.
boss battle. He had this motivational music. I felt motivated from that music. I felt like I could actually destroy that boss with this kind of music.
Yeah, because like for me, the thing is, I am not a musically inclined person, and so sound design is like the one aspect of game development in that I cannot do myself. But it's like it's an aspect I really respect, right? And it's super important. Like like there's so many parts of like making a game that is really like fundamental, like the writing, even just like writing like narratively and like program, I don't know how you would describe that, programmatically, and the art design, and then like even like the UI design. That's something I need to work on because being like a character designer can be great, but it feels like even just that the UI design could be completely different. And so here's the end of our little level. I'm very bad
Aww.
at this game. So my apologies for like taking so long to get through the level. I'm just not a good platformer player.
It's okay. It's a nice ending. I really like how it's just so calming. It doesn't have it doesn't feel like I'm being stabbed in the eyes by a bunch of colors and music and that stuff. It feels really calming. Like I can just kind of
Yeah.
I mean that one part doesn't feel calming at all, but the calming music definitely would probably help
I
me
think
not.
that's definitely how I feel about Celeste, cuz like I like you mentioned how one of the comments said like color design for like movies, and that's a big thing for me too. Like cuz I really like making the characters. Why won't it let me present my Pico 8 game? And so I think that's always what I try to do is like especially since you're in like pixel art, you have like a palette that you normally want to stick to. And Pico 8 is really interesting for that because you are limited to the 16 colors Pico 8 gives you. And I don't know why it's not showing up as like one of the screens I can show, but I'll just present this because Thicket Force exits once you finish the game. But like basically Pico 8 you only have 16 colors and it's like a fantasy console, right? And so this game is really small. It's just like a it was a physics project. We had to make a basic physics game, but I thought I would put the extra charm into it. I had a plan for it, but unfortunately I got swamped with a bunch of other projects and I never really got back to getting into it. But the funny thing is here Pico 8 can only hold 128 by 128 pixels worth of sprites. And so this here, the sprite you're seeing, if I'm presenting correctly, because I think I'm presenting
You're
it,
good, don't worry.
okay, uh, is actually 128 by 128. So if I were to have this menu screen, that would be all of the sprites that are available for Pico 8 gone. And you think that's a lot, but it's actually not that much. So basically, what I had to do was I took a program someone made for Pico 8, and it basically spits out a long line of code. If I were to look at the code here, it basically spits out an entire huge line of string, like that it has all the color values for where did I put it? Because I haven't looked at this in like a year or two, and it's pinpointing the image like basically it builds up the entire image that's on screen just by changing the color value of each pixel on the screen, which is kind of ridiculous and pretty hilarious. I so all my sprites here, if you look here, I've just got like running sprites,
Oh my god.
and you have to do like the thing is with making your sprites is you also have to keep the whole point of Pico 8. I'm sorry if I'm stuttering a lot. I'm
It's
trying to
okay.
like catch up with
Take
what
take
I'm
your
thinking.
time. You got time. Don't worry. You can just take your time with it.
The whole point of like Pico 8 is like the limited restrictions because it's like a fantasy console that's supposed to be mimicking 8-bit games, right? So you only have a limited amount of map space and a limited amount of sprite space. If I think if you're looking at doing a pixel art game, you should really like try and just make even the smallest little game in Pico 8 because I found it was really fun because like it's so restrictive and you have to work like well in the sprites to show like movement because like that's not a lot of space because I only have 4 panels here and then the rest is like the map content. And so if you zoom out on the map at the bottom, that's where it stores all your sprites, kind of, which is pretty interesting. So you have to have like a dynamic of, do you want like more of the playable map but less sprites, or do you want like more detail but a smaller game? And I've seen people make crazy things in Pico 8, and like the original Celeste was made in Pico 8, which is absurd to me because it's really well done. So I feel like it's a good like proof of concept and a good game jam, like a good place to make game jams. Like so you can eventually like take it and move it to like the next level, kind of like how they did with Celeste, because the original Celeste is like very small and you can just play it. I think it's even open source, but like yeah, it's just like a little runner here. Oops, hold on, because you have to input the commands in order to. But just like it's a very small game, but that's what I kind of. A lot of these are the games that I worked on during school, but I find Pico 8 because I was surprised that you hadn't heard of it because we spent like a little. Oh, I clipped through the floor. We spent a small unit like working on Pico 8 just as like a starter thing when we were first getting into games. So this one's like pretty old. Like even I find the sprites I could probably draw them way better now, but you
Yeah.
know how it is. But
Yeah, I get what you mean. Yeah. I'm not in the second year game programming course, so I wouldn't know for sure, but I do know of a friend who actually was looking through Celeste Pico 8 files, which was pretty cool that I got to see him do. Um, I don't know. I thought that was really interesting. I think the limitations actually spark more creativity. It's a weird
yeah,
contrast for sure, but I think if you're given more limitations, that kind of, as much as that narrows down the ideas you can have, it also kind of sparks more creativity in people to try to create something different.
yeah, because like I think when I was booting this up originally, and it took me like a good 5 minutes to boot it up because completely forgot how to use Pico 8. This is like 16,000 lines of code, and I'm pretty sure, or is it 16,000 characters? But I'm like pretty sure half of that is like the one's big sprite. But like it's written in Lua if I remember correctly, and so you only have a couple tabs at your use, so you have to like I think working small sometimes is bigger, and I think a lot of people who are pixel artists are normally a big fan of the retro kind of games and like trying to mimic the old styles. So like the limitations of 16 colors also applies to like code almost because like uh there's like the Game Boy, which only had like 4 like colors, and then there's like the Super Nintendo and whatnot, like the Super Famicom.
Yeah,
So
that's cool though. It's really cool to see things like this being created with such limitations.
yeah, because I don't even think I have like the full Pico 8 because I only got it from like my teacher. But there's like a feature called Explore if you have like the proper version, uh, where basically you just type into the console Explore and it shows you some of the recent and like cartridges is what they're called. Each game is called like a cartridge because it's like a virtual console, and basically There's so many good games that people have made inside Pico 8. Like I remember seeing someone recreated like Doom, so like a 3D, like they managed to make a a mimic of like
Oh my
a
god.
3D like illusion in Pico 8, and it's kind of crazy because you only have the 16 colors, and it was just rendering all that like every second. And someone made like almost like a Star Fox s game, and so like it's kind of crazy because you only have like a certain amount of code anyways. There's I think like see like line 79 out of 94. So I think that's how many tokens you can get up to is 8,192. So I think the restrictions add a lot of creativity, which is why I kind of like it for game jams. And I mean, my course in Eastern College, my teacher is pretty great, but ours, it kind of varied from like the rubric sometimes because like we kind of dithered away from it. And so this probably isn't something that they'll go over in like maybe your course, but I just think it's something like interesting to experiment with in your free time because like I kind of want to get back into making Pico 8 games once I'm done with Dinosaur Academy because it's just I don't know, it's like there's something charming about it.
I think, yeah, it's definitely good to have that kind of hobby and do that. I think, yeah, Tam said something good here too. Um, I honestly, in general, I don't like to base my code off of other people's codes. I like to take ideas from like code, like not even the way they did it, just like what they put down for like I don't know if I need to, and I'm gonna go completely off the rails here and go like, oh, if I need to change a image that I'm inputting into a computer to a grayscale instead of full color. I wouldn't go around and like grab other people's code and be like, I'm gonna take their basically structure how they did it and do the same thing. I take like their little idea from it. So I think that taking others' code, to be honest, I've never looked at another game's code and been like, yep, I'm gonna go like right off of that kind of thing. I always like to
Yeah.
look at the idea of the game and be like, oh, um, what did this game do differently from the game that I'm creating? If it's similar, and if it's not, I'm asking what are some funky little features that the game has kind of put into the game that people really like.
Yeah.
I think all of those are some really important things, and I think even Pico 8, you get a lot of feedback from just Pico 8 alone. I think,
Yeah, cuz
again, the
like
whole limitations, yeah.
Because like it was really surprising to hear that Celeste like originally started as like a Pico 8 game because like that was how I heard of Pico 8 first because I had never really experimented with it beyond that. But one thing which I think is quite interesting about it though is like my character sprite on the screen, if I recall correctly, the black color in Pico 8 is basically transparent almost. Like, so basically, you have your 15 colors and everything else is rendered black. And so I had to write code to draw the outline of the black sprites around the character because to add, like, that boldness because it kind of blended too much by hand because otherwise if you were to draw with a sprite that was using black, sometimes it'll just, disappear when you render the game. And it's because that's kind of like considered like transparent in the code. So it's kind of interesting to like have like the limitations from like, the A- Atari era and whatnot. That era was way beyond my time though for games. I'm more of like the GBA kind of fan.
Yeah. So, I had just a couple questions, if that's all right. You answering?
Yeah.
All right, I was coughing there. Um, so I'm gonna diverge a little bit, unless you have anything else that you want to say about your game specifically here.
No, I think I'm all burnt out for that.
That's fair. Actually, speaking of burnt out, I was going to ask you, how do you personally deal with burnout when it comes to creating games or artist block? I think it's called, or writer's block, whatever it's
Yeah,
called. And how do you keep motivation while working on a game? I think you kind
I'll
of
admit.
explained a little bit of it, where like you said you play games for inspiration, but I'd like to hear more
Yeah,
about that if that's possible.
I'll admit I've had my highs and I've had my lows while working on like Dinosaur Academy because like in the 6 months you can have a lot of like things happen, and like whether it's outside of your control, like familial issues or whatnot, or even just like like mentioning how I think I had a bug. One bug was I was working on the combat for my character, and the sprite would disappear whenever I would attack, and it drive me crazy, like the health sprite. And the solution was that when I was transforming the health sprite so that it would get smaller every time someone gets hit, it would eventually, like, I was using, I think, vector 3 instead of vector 2. So I was transforming it on the Z axis, which isn't in a 2D game. So it was changing like perspective. So it was on like the 1. So it meant it disappeared completely because my game runs on the Z axis of 0. But I spent like 2 days trying to figure that out, like 2 full days of like just working, and I couldn't figure it out, and it really just like demoralized me. And like that happens a lot, even just like doing the sprites. I find it's I haven't even done much pixel art like for fun outside of doing game assets in a long time because now I just kind of associate it with game assets. So that's why I mostly draw on like Clip Studio instead. And I feel like it'll always happen. Like burnout will always eventually happen. It's just you have to get like better at managing it. And like I guess like even like I said for playing some games, sometimes I was even like questioning whether I wanted to still do game development if it was like getting too hard. I'm like this is like too stressful and I'm just doing it by myself. Like was it like at a studio in comparison or whatnot. And like some of the games that I took as inspiration, like Earthbound Mother 3, I ended up like finishing them and they kind of like reminded me like why I want to make games. Cause, like playing through a nice, beautiful story and having it all conclude and you're like, wow, I kind of want to like I find every time I complete a game that I was because I don't play much games anymore, but I try to have at least one concurrent game that I like chew on when I'm not working on like game development and then try and whittle my way through it. I find completing a game like that uh definitely boosted my morale a lot if it's a game I liked because it's like now I feel invigorated to make my own games again. But also like even just like sometimes just getting away, like getting out of the house and like just grabbing like a coffee from the local coffee place and like just trying to think of different ideas. Even some of the ways I like tried to like keep my head focused on Dinosaur Academy was like when I was getting like demotivated, I just like pivot to like thinking up different ideas just to like get that creativity juices going. Just do it for like fun. And then so eventually when I like came back to working on like the code for Dinosaur Academy, I was like I felt a little more reinvigorated. It's like it sucks cuz like you can't just keep churning even if I try. Like I because eventually you'll just like peter out and you kind of need to rest. But the way I'm like is if I like rest from like working on my code, I'm like, oh my god, I'm, I'm having all this time to myself. You know what I should do? I should be productive. And then so I just go back into that work cycle again.
Yeah, you gotta like. I think that's something definitely we gotta be careful of as game developers. I used to do that all the time. What I used to do instead was I used to live when I lived with my parents. I used to just go upstairs and talk with them. I used to talk to my dad
Yeah.
about the ideas I had and that stuff. Or nowadays, I hop on a call with some friends, or
Yeah.
I go and play a game. I explain, and usually when I explain it, I realize, oh, hey, there's a solution I didn't know. Or
Yes.
yeah,
That is that's what my teacher called the rubber duck solution. Is
oh
he
my
said
god, I love that
what
solution so much. Sorry,
it's
I had to
he
say
said
that.
what no, it's fine. Basically, he said what he was taught when he went to school was that well, basically you can do it with anything, but he was taught like, to have like a rubber duck on his desk. And so what you would do is you would explain to the rubber duck the problems you've had like in your code and while you're explaining it to something else or someone else, you're like, "Oh my god, that's the solution." I even had that the other night when I was just explaining a code problem I had with Fernando when he was like, what's going on with your game?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm working on this here with like my scene transition, but it won't work for combat like it does for the transition, like swapping, teleporting the player across the map. Because Dinosaur Academy's in one big scene. Originally, I had it set up that you would swap scenes to go to different rooms on the map, but instead, I've just sprited that interior way further off from like the seeable, playable part,
Oh,
and you
interesting.
just get
Yeah.
warped there. And so while I was like explaining my problem, I'm like, oh, that's the solution. It was childed to the objects which get hidden as I was swapping my states from like overworld to combat, and so it would just immediately disappear. And that's what the solution was. So, just even talking about like, so I totally agree with that aspect, right? Like,
Yeah, that's actually funny. I actually have 7 rubber ducks by me, um, that I
yeah.
always talk to. I don't think it sounds as sophisticated as you. I think it's more I'm going insane. Um,
Yeah.
I I do a course called CS50, which if anyone hasn't done yet, I would highly recommend if you're a programmer. It's probably the best free online course. It's made by Harvard. It's all for programming. It teaches you all the like algorithms and that stuff. They use that tactic too. They actually explain it quite well. Their mascot is a rubber ducky, and I might actually end up buying one online when I'm done the course. But like, it's they really I think it's really popular within the community just to talk to a rubber duck, and I think that's really funny that this whole generation is now gonna understand that they have to talk to a rubber duck to solve their problems
I
instead
think
of a
it's
real
really
person.
funny. 'Cause, like, I don't know, 'cause I thought it was funny, the rubber duck thing specifically, 'cause, like, when I was a kid, I was, like, super obsessed with, like, ducks, so I have, like, a bunch of rubber ducks in my house too, so it was, like, super easy to, like,
Oh
just grab one and,
yeah.
like, put it on my desk.
That's what I did for one of my projects actually. I did a whole thing. It was about gooses actually. I had a whole website that I do in HTML. It showed you
Yeah.
fun facts about gooses. That's it. It was great. Or geese, sorry. Um, but yes, that's really cool. I think there's some important information in there, especially the rubber ducky method. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that even if you're not in programming, you can get something out of there because it doesn't necessarily have to be a rubber duck. It can be another person if you
Yeah.
really feel that social. Um, it could be basically anything. You could just write it down on a piece of paper. My dad always used to tell me, write something down on a piece of paper. Like if you have an idea, just write it down. Scribble stuff while you're talking to people or
Yeah.
when you're thinking. You're gonna figure out something from it. From you doing another action while thinking of that, you might subconsciously think of it. I don't know. It's just I'm getting into the philosophical side of it, but I think it's really interesting that doing another activity actually helps you with your problems, and even if you're experiencing burnout due to this. I always found things like movies or just talking to another person would hype me up again. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I totally get that too, because like I think trying to have that separation between like game dev and your other stuff going on in your life is also like a good way to help with like that burnout too. Because like normally I find tend to get art block a lot, but like I get frustrated at it because I love to just draw as like a hobby and just for fun. But like normally just drawing something that isn't like sometimes if you just wait, because I find uh it's not like it's weird to explain, but like even if you aren't like drawing or if you aren't like programming right now, like right this second, you can still end up becoming like a better programmer just by like doing other things, or like or a better artist, depends on the situation, just by like even if you're not actively doing something, just like learning or like researching about it and like planning stuff that, oh, like I'm gonna do this when I feel more in the mood to do it. Like it kind of makes you a little more resourceful, and you can still kind of learn just by observing, and also compared to like learning by doing, right? So it's kind
Yeah.
of hard to like you know realize like, because I'm a very learn by doing person, and it's kind of hard to like have myself sit down and be like, well, I really should be like working on something, and like I really need to work on my project. It's like due in a couple like a couple days. So that was kind of like how I was in school.
Oh my god,
But
yes. That was a task and a half. Yeah, getting work done in school. I can do stuff as a hobby. I can do programming as a hobby. Oh my god, like working on all these apps and that stuff I'm doing. I love that. As soon as I turn to schoolwork and I have to do it, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna see how hard I can bullshit this.
yeah,
If I can get away with an 80 with the weirdest bit of code I think I've ever written, if I can do that, then it's good. But I think definitely something I've learned over a little while is definitely like trying to put your all into the things that you really think is important. So I'm sure Dinosaur Academy and those types of games like Pico 8 and that stuff definitely probably taught you a lot
yeah,
more than just going to school and doing the assigned tasks that they kind of give you most of the stuff for.
yeah. Because like I find the thing is those. I guess it could also be like explain like the way I see it, like for artists, like doing commission work. Like I don't really do commission work for my art because it just like stresses me out and I need to make it like perfect. And so like I guess that's kind of like how I feel about like the student projects too that I had to do was like instead of like doing the creativity for like just fun and like the hell of it, you're kind of you have like a rubric that you're going to be graded on and like how like receptive like your professor is going to be to your code. And so that kind of gets you all in, that got me all in like inside my head and whatnot. And so I think that's the hard part of, is trying to even like with Dinosaur Academy, even if it's like somewhat of a passion project, it still also feels like work at the end of the day. So it's kind of hard to like get that balance of like having the motivation to do it, like but the same amount of motivation that you would have just to like do something for fun, if that makes sense. Like obviously you need to have like breathers and do something for fun, but like to not slack, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah, yeah, I get what you mean for sure. Yeah, I think, and by the way, if you guys have any questions in the audience, feel free to shout them out, or if you want to just type them in, we can get to them in a couple minutes here.
yeah.
Um, but yes, I do think all that's really important. And I think, yeah, I really, to be honest with you, I was just really like happy to see some games that we could
Yeah.
broadcast, some games that I could see as well, because as much as you can talk about this stuff, you never really can, what's the word for it? As much as you can talk about this stuff, you kind of want to show something, show what you mean by this stuff. Like you can say,
Yeah.
yes, I am a game developer that does this, that. Uh, but especially with like all of our talk nights so far, we've always had people who have some sort of uh, game or a link to a game that they're making that they can show off, which I think personally is really cool. I always like when people have something to show for their work, things that they can kind of prove. Not even proving, it's that like, hey, I'm a game developer, but I don't have any games out there, and it's like,
Yeah.
so how does that one work?
That's the hard part too. I found with my schooling specifically, I don't know if anybody you'd feel the same is like um it felt almost counterintuitive to a certain point. Like obviously schoolwork was awesome and fun and I enjoyed it. Oh, hold on. Did my computer? Oh my god, I thought my I hadn't touched my mouse in a while there and I thought my computer turned off cuz it's a little rickety. But as I was saying, the goal for the end of the day, even though you have your assignments, in my opinion, is to have like a nice portfolio piece, which is kind of what I plan on doing with like Dinosaur Academy. Is like I'm like, look at me, I coded, I writed, and I drew like this entire game, like so it'd be like nice on like a resume looking for like just some eventual job. But I found like when it comes to school projects, like for games that you get to do, it you don't really have much time to put that like polish and care into it because it felt like even like I was just jumping from one project to the next, right? So it felt like I think it was really the only game that consider like complete out of the bunch. even if you're like still learning from those incomplete projects, that's like it kind of sucks because you don't really have like a full out game. Like my game's not even like released yet, so technically I don't have anything to say about like the publishing aspect, right? But like if it kind of just it feels so much better to have a complete project, like something that you can just like, sit back and be like, this is done instead of just like being like, okay, this is like good enough for my assignment and then like move on. But obviously it's kind of hard to like, go back to a project that you worked on for school if you've got more planning ahead that you wanted to work on. I mean, I tried to always like catch up and like, make the games that I had to do for school the best that I could, but I always felt like I wanted to do like more with them. So and game development's hard, like, because you never get to expect. You can never put like a set date on like how long you're gonna work on something, because something will always show up, like whether it's like a bug or you pivot and you decide to do something different, and that'll end up taking time, right? It's kind of like a choose your own adventure,
Oh,
where you like
yes.
choose different paths and eventually it comes to a conclusion. Eventually,
Yeah, yeah. So you'd say your main goal of this game at the moment is kind of creating a portfolio piece for yourself.
yeah, I think that's what my main goal with Dinosaur Academy was. And also it was for like scope management because like I had made other projects all in school and like Vampirates and Thicket, and but I wanted to like see how far I could like make something like by myself for like the first time outside of school. And so it was kind of testing the waters for me, like, testing like how well, because I had a way bigger plan for Dinosaur Academy originally, and I kind of whittled away at that idea because it was just completely unfeasible. Because originally Dinosaur Academy was made in Unreal Engine 4, and I would show you the build for that, but I don't have the files on my computer at the moment because this is still a relatively new computer. But my plan was I was gonna make kind of equivalent to like Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, like like the randomly generated levels, and you'd be like playing like that. But it was also gonna have like a visual novel aspect to it, like talking wise for the dialogue. And I had the system set up, but Unreal wasn't like the right engine for it because like Unreal is very. I find it works very, very well at like the very specific things it does, which is like 3D shooters and other 3D games, but it's like feels very tailor made for shooters. And so a 2D like RPG didn't really, it felt like I was kind of clashing with the engine at some points.
Yeah.
So,
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. Yeah, Luff, you like that one, don't you?
yeah,
It's one of his favorite
it's
games.
like
So yeah.
because yeah, I was playing Explorers of Sky while I was like developing like my first couple of ideas for it, and actually a lot of the sprites that I drew for Dinosaur Academy, took like references from like the games. Like I wanted to see how like the dinosaurs would walk by looking at sprites like for Groudon, for like Charmander, Charizard, and all the other reptilian like Pokemon that are in the game, so I could kind of get like a sense of like the art direction and whatnot. But like,
Interesting. Yeah.
I just unfortunately I just had to end up scrapping that idea because it was just way too much out of scope. Like the randomly generating dungeons, like I could do that, and like the whole super branching like visual novel idea. It's like it feels like you kind of want to whittle away until you make something that is small. Because right now, my goal for Dinosaur Academy is you have one map, and it's basically the way I like to describe it is like the first part of Earthbound, the town Onet, where it's just like the NPCs that you talk to, like a couple like bosses and whatnot, but just that slice of the game is that's how much I want Dinosaur Academy to be at the moment. And then eventually, I think as I like improve as a developer, maybe I'll go back to like, working on that mystery dungeon aspect. But the thing is obviously it's awesome to dream big, but you also kind of have to be a little more realistic. But I don't like to completely discard those like more expansive
For
game
sure.
ideas, right?
Yeah, I
It's
think
just you gotta. It's kind of like art, because like you have to get to that level where you can make something like that.
yeah, I definitely think, and I think this was said in a previous talk night too. If it's a portfolio piece, it really shouldn't take more than 6 months, or
Yeah,
more, or whatever it is. 6 to 8, I guess. I would personally say. Uh, and I'm gonna generalize it a little bit and just say for like the majority of things, when it comes to programming, I think 6 to 8 months is a decent amount of time for a portfolio piece.
yeah.
If it's for like a school project, it could be way smaller than that.
Oh yeah,
Like for example, I've taken school projects I've done and made them my portfolio pieces. I'd take a month or two, work on a game really hard. I'd get
mm,
I don't know if I'd call it a game demo or a tech demo. I'd call it a like basically I'm showing off the requirements that I need for the class.
yeah,
And then I take those and then I basically take another 4 months and further build on it, which is
yeah,
pretty cool.
yeah. That's I totally get that. Yeah, because I feel like I could probably do a lot more, like in the 6 months that I have worked on the game, but I spent like even just like drawing the assets, they're like the trees. I spent like at least a good week like just drawing different designs for trees, and I wasn't happy with how they looked. So I just kept redrawing them.
Yeah, that
So,
that's fair. Um, so it looks like Fernando had a couple of questions. I think we've answered a couple. I kind of led into the main goals one. I don't know if you can see the chat page or not. Page on the
let me just oh,
it's
the chat right here, the guest
no no
chat.
no no. If you click back on the talk night,
Yep.
you're gonna see in the top right. There's gonna be a little notification with 20 on it.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, you can click on that. You can see all the different ones we posted, all the fun little things we posted.
Yeah.
I try to incorporate them into our discussion as well, so you would kind of understand that too. But Fernando looked like he had a couple questions there. I thumbs up the one. Uh,
Okay.
I don't know if you want to just answer the ones you haven't answered already, or like you feel like you can add on. Feel free to.
I think to answer like the first one, like what are you? I'll just probably let me. I'll open Discord on my phone so I can like open it here and then just read the questions off, so you don't need to keep looking at the Discord like feedback of my presentation, right? But I think I've learned so much while working on my game. I think the overall thing that I could say I learned the most when working on Dinosaur Academy was like management, like time management, like scope management, uh even like managing myself, like managing like what I had to do like each day for the project, like being a little more I'm not very oh my god, I know the word for it. Why am I organized? Yeah. Even being a little more organized, because I'm not very like resourceful at being organized, so I felt like I kind of like had to pick myself up by the bootstraps and try and like end up thinking like I am my own boss and making the game and like, putting myself to work, right? So I think that was like the main thing I kind of cuz like there's so many varied facets of like things that you learn while working on a game. Like, you learn how to be a better like problem solver, but I think management is definitely the big thing cuz like especially when it comes to scope, cuz scope is like a very hard thing to like think about, because like I find I still always like I've always been the person who like overestimates like how I can make a game and like what ideas I have for a game. And then so when I end up making the game, I'm like, oh my god, this is a bit too much. And so I kind of like have to like scale back and go a little more like resourceful, a little more practical. So that's something that I've kind of learned how to work on while making this game and the other games too. But it's something that I've been doing ever since I was like a hobbyist. Like I was trying to make like full on games that could probably be posted to like Steam and like Pygame. Like Pygame, which is not the best place to make games in my opinion, but it's a good starting point. So I'd say that's the big the big theme I learned while working on this game, kind of like the end of like a fable, like what's the moral? And it's just trying to manage.
See what other questions.
There we go.
I
Yeah,
think
sorry.
and
So,
because and also when it comes to like an audience for like because the thing is with when it comes to making an audience for your game, that's kind of like tricky to get a hold on because like for me, I always like first thing in my mind is I'm like I want to make a game that I would enjoy playing, and so the thing is I'm very particular when it comes to the games I play. So I don't know how like broad of like a spectrum that is for when it comes to like marketability for a game because that's a whole can of worms I haven't really like delved into yet. But I think my main like aims for when I was designing Dinosaur Academy was like to aim it towards the kind of people who like enjoy like uh pixel art, who enjoy like RPGs and like I don't plan on having it be like super like that big of a story, but I have some like plans for a story that will happen when I release the full game. And so I mostly my biggest inspirations like I took a bit of inspiration from like Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, like I mentioned, and like how Treasure Town is laid out and like how the NPCs talk there. And I took a lot of inspiration like from like Earthbound and like that modernity compared to like how most RPGs are like fantastical and medieval, which I still like, but I kind of like the uniqueness of that. And so I that's mostly what I kind of like try to most of my projects feel like they're always aimed at the same audience, which is probably not the best thing to do, but I feel like maybe it's kind of good to cater to yourself because it feels like I feel like if you end up liking it, some people will end up eventually liking it too because like I'm not like super big on like playing like shooter games because I'm not very good at them and like I'm not very so like RPGs always been kind of like my main go-to games because I like the storytelling aspect of it. So that's normally what I try to like lean into when making my games, even though I've had like some different ideas. Like maybe like I kind of want to make like a Metroidvania eventually because I think eventually I'd like to make Vampires into like something equivalent to almost like Shovel Knight or like Pizza Tower. Some of those indie games that are kind of like based on like Wario Land and like the old platformer like SNES games and such.
Pizza
But
Tower.
yeah, that's what I think is my like biggest market that I'm trying to serve. I'm trying to serve myself,
That's fair. I
which
mean, yeah, with the portfolio piece, I think that's probably the person you want to serve the most. I mean, to be fair, I think with a portfolio piece, you're actually technically trying to go after the people that are going to be looking at that portfolio. Um, I think Paige just there you go. You're back. I'll invite you back up here. Yeah, I think that's really important there. I just invited you to speak, Paige. I don't know if you saw that or not. So do another one real quick.
Oh, my bad. I didn't realize that opening it on my phone would like screw everything up. I was just trying to read the chat.
It's okay. Here, you're not sharing your screen. I don't think so. You can just go into Discord. We've got something open in the background for our recording, which is kind of nice. So don't worry.
Okay, so that's good. So I'm not too worried about like having something on the screen. I was just as while I was muted, I guess I was just saying that you can continue saying what you were talking about when talking about how who you're trying to like serve, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I do feel like serving yourself and like, obviously you want people to play your game, but at the same time, if it's a portfolio piece, I always, all of my projects, I'm always trying to impress myself again. I think that's not exactly the best way to always look at it sometimes, because you kind of
yeah,
have higher standards for yourself, but at the same time, I really love comparing my old work to my new work and seeing how much I improved and
Yeah.
just kind of pushing myself beyond what I think I can do. Like if I'm making an app, I don't just go, yeah, I'm gonna make a simple Google Maps, another Google Maps, you know. I'm like, no, I don't want to just make a Google Apps. Like my ego won't let me do that. I need to go
Yeah.
further past that and create something that will truly impress me, not just a simple Google Maps app.
Well,
Exactly.
like it's kind of interesting because if you look at like games that are being like developed, it feels like every now and then there's a game that is unique enough compared to the other like the market of games that are being released that it ends up being a breakout hit, and then it feels like a lot of developers are like, well, this is popular, let's ride on the coattails of it, which I think was quite evident with like PUBG and Fortnite, because like PUBG was like, I think that was before Fortnite, right? Yeah, it was, because Fortnite originally was like that building game, like basically like COD Zombies, and with a bit of like Minecraft aspects, where it was like you build your fort during the night to fight off the zombies. And they added that battle royale feature because of PUBG and how PUBG just blew up the battle royale genre, right? So it kind of, it's like you want to like, stay close to what people know, because like obviously like there is a lot of inspiration with like battle royale. I guess you could say it's kind of like the Hunger Games, because I used to play a lot of like Minecraft Hunger Games when I was younger. But uh so just you kind of always want to try and make something that's like familiar but a little different, right? So just I think having that uniqueness can be risky, but also like it can end up, it's like a risky reward like situation.
For sure, yeah. Um, yeah, I think all that's important. I don't know. I think Fernando had one or two more questions. Just
Yeah, let me scroll up here. So I think so this one's about phases of development. So like I think it's kind of weird for me to like state the phases, because like for originally it was just like a concept. So I'd say the first phase was just like the idea, like, and it was like I wanted to, it was pretty vague, like I wanted to make something like silly and like with dinosaurs. And then so I kind of like started like feeding that idea, and then I think it went through like what kind of genre would I'd like try and make, cuz I think that's kind of the hardest part, is trying to pick kind of game you do want to make. So like trying to figure out like, oh, well, what do I want combat to be like? Do I want it to just be like another run of the mill RPG, which is kind of what I ended up working with because for scope reasons, or do I want to end up having it be like a mystery dungeon esque, or like maybe similar to like how like Earthbound does it with like the rolling HP, or like other RPGs like that, or like Final Fantasy VII, where it's like uh, the bar fills up and you have to attack at that certain point when it reaches the max, because like you have like your energy. I haven't played it in a while, but I think having like that concept idea, and then it was just kind of like almost like planting like a tree, just kind of like growing that tree and like figure and having it branch out into different processes. So I say like then I got into like the initial like couple of prototypes where it was like s- trying to figure out like what engine worked best, and like flipping between like Unity or like working in Unreal, and like even thinking about like going to Game Maker or not, because that was something I thought about was a couple months ago, was whether I'd swap from Unity to like a different engine, like to better suit my needs, because there's a couple things that I like about Unity and a couple things I really hate about Unity. The animator is one of the ones that drives me crazy. So I think once I got to like that point, like where I had a solid like foundation, then it fell more into the process of like the proper like game development, because like like prototyping, like first concepts, like implementing basic features, core features, and getting up there. I think the phase, like for me, to say what phase that hasn't happened yet, I'm just right on the cusp of like uh playtesting, because like I feel like it's in. I obviously I have to iron out some bugs that I didn't even know were in my code until I showed it to you guys. But I think it's once I get like combat a little less buggy, and like get some pesticide insecticide on my code, I kind of want to have it like finally put in the hands of like other players. Like I have like some of my friends who will be willing to play it, and like some of my family members, like try and get that like very level of game like playing? Like, do you play like just like a casual game on like your phone? Do you just don't play games at all? Do you like play a lot of games or do you play different games for me? You know, kind of like the varied types of people because everyone has like different experiences with games. And so then once I have like that game playtesting phase done, I think I'm probably just going to end up like taking a lot of data from that, iterating on that, and like trying to make it a bit better, and then move towards like final polish and like making the map like finally like pretty, and then like trying to get it to like be fully ready. Which I think now that I've got like most of the hard parts out of the way, and it's just like the bug fixing and drawing like more assets, tons of assets, I think it'll be a lot smoother. So like the hard part's already done, like climbing the mountain, and now it's just kind of like trying to get that nice, like the final lap of a marathon almost, where it's like you got to get that polish. That's what I think are the phases that have yet to occur, but I'm not too well versed in development phases myself yet, because like I know of like the AAA terms, but that's just how I see it in my head.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think one of the most important things I had to do when I was making games for myself was definitely I would run around, I would go to different people, I'd be like, hey, play test my game now.
Yeah.
And always be with friends or family. I used to, when I used to do this, I gave my brother my games actually, um, and he used to break the everlasting shit out of them as much as he could. And it was so funny to see because he'd always find a new bug that I couldn't even fathom.
That's
And then
impressive.
yeah, and I'd always be like, okay, how did that happen? And it's like, oh, you just have to spam this button, or you just have to like, I don't know, do it in this certain way. And I'm like, some of them I don't mind keeping because I do think some bugs are more fun. But
Oh
some
yeah.
bugs I do think have to be fixed, and the ones that have to be fixed are always the most annoying to fix. But it's
Yeah,
quite fun.
that's true. Because like sometimes bugs could be a feature and people will never know about it.
Exactly, right? Yeah. But yeah,
Yeah.
do we have any other questions by any chance? Anyone have any final thoughts that they want to talk about in the audience? I'll give you guys a minute. But yes, thank you, Paige, for coming on today. Do you have any final thoughts as well you'd like to say? Any?
Um. Uh. I. I. I really appreciate you guys having me. I'm sorry if I sounded quite like nervous or like stuttery because I've always been kind of like an introvert and I've never really like presented something like this before. So this was kind of like a foreign experience for me. So I hope I felt a little more in the groove after once I got into the headspace for it. But like I think I hopefully I think we covered some interesting topics in about game development and like how it how like to man I'm sorry
It's okay,
how
don't worry.
like how like basically to handle it and like my experiences like basically like some of my past experiences as like a student since I'm still like pretty fresh out of like school, right? And so how I could like try and like give that like as a like advice sort of things.
I really think that it's important for people like you to come on these talk nights, and I record all of these because I quite love listening to them afterwards. There's a lot that I learn from even just thinking about it afterwards. And that's the thing I love about podcasts, especially. You kind of,
Yeah.
when you listen to them, I'm gonna be honest, I listen to about 50% of what they say. It's the thought afterwards that I really start to go, oh, this is what they meant. I understand this. I do that a lot with audiobooks. I end up
Yeah.
listening to them, and then afterwards I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense. Um, but yes, thank you so much for coming out because I
Yeah,
really
it
think
was
that
a pleasure.
I hope you
I
got some stuff out of it too.
I think I did too. I'd probably I'll try and like keep I'm like myself versed in your little uh Discord here. I'm a total Discord lurker though. I'm in like a bunch of Discords that I just like never check. But I'll like try and peek my head in now and then, and I'll probably reach out like once I think Dinosaur Academy is in like a state for like playtesting to see if anyone wants to like uh playtest it for me or like and just like see if they want to give feedback. If they want to though, no like no like forcing here, you know. I'll
Yeah,
just try and keep like myself versed.
I 100% think you should reach out. Like I would totally be down too. We've got some people in this chat as well that are absolutely amazing at playtesting. Um, and I'm sure you'll find a lot of fun people. Like it's okay to be a lurker. I mean, that's kind of how I started out in this server. I lurked, and then I
Yeah.
applied for mod, and that's how I ended up here. Which I thought was really fun. So yeah, lurking is completely fine. Like we have all these events as well. You ever want to come to one online? Usually we run them. That's fun too. I definitely want to get more people in here too, more talk nights, so we can kind of
Yeah,
just
start and build it up.
yeah, build. I really like having this catalog of videos and information afterwards. I think it's important for people to have a source, especially if it's a source that they know of. So, like, if you go to George Brown, you say, "Hey, this club has this gaming club at George Brown has um, these podcasts where they talk about game development." I'm going into that field and actually hearing it from people who has graduated and has experience like you do. I really think that's super important. And
Yeah.
thank you so much again for coming out. It's definitely a lot of work to come out and talk for an hour and 30 minutes about specifically. I'm sure it is possible. Like for me, I could talk about 5 hours about game development, but I'm sure.
Yeah, it didn't feel like an hour and 30. You said your like longest one was like an hour 45 and I'm like, I think it's been about like 50 minutes.
Yeah, for sure. I I always am amazed at how long these go for. I always end up thinking, I think the first one I assumed would be an hour long. It went past that. Yeah, that they're all really interesting to listen to, but I do think that like sometimes I'm like, am I rambling for too long about one topic? Am I, expanding this talk night by 10 more minutes? But yes, I'll stop rambling as much right now. Thank you so much, Paige, for coming out here. And
Problem.
yeah,
Maybe I'll have to join some other talk nights like as a cuz I'm sure there's a lot I could learn from other people too.
yes, I've personally learned so much from the other ones. And just for everyone here as well as you, Paige, we actually have one next Sunday as well. Everything's listed in our little, in the top left, we have a little page called events page, and I also post it
Yeah.
in the announcements all the time. We have another one on, oh, sorry, we have it on the 18th on Saturday at 3. Um,
Ooh,
and they're gonna,
SQE.
yes, that's their team. They're gonna be bringing over people like their artists, designers, and that stuff, programmers. So we're gonna hear a lot from the different parts of the industry as well. And
Yeah,
we can
that's interesting, especially cuz I'm just like some guy.
Oh, that's all
So,
fine. I think hearing from different sides, I like hearing from indie developer side of things, and then you hear from the corporations, and then you hear from the people in the middle. Like, I think getting all those views is really important. But thank
yeah,
you again for
no
coming out
problem.
here, and
Thank you for having me.
no problem. I hope to see you here again soon.
Yes, I'll keep in touch for sure.
Please do, yes. I would love to hear more about your game too. I don't think I have. Oh, I do have your portfolio. I will link Paige's portfolio in the chat real quick if I can find your. Where did I
Yeah,
put
I need to update that website. I swear HTML is like the one code to me that's just like woof, it's work.
it? It's definitely something, that's for sure. Yeah. Um. Okay, here we go. I think I've got a talk night. I'm just gonna put it in the talk night Q&A. That's your. If I'm correct, that's your portfolio right there.
Yeah.
Um, I'm assuming you don't have your LinkedIn on here yet.
No, I my LinkedIn is kind of bare bones at the moment. I'm trying to get like everything like eventually sorted up for like more like professional stuff cuz like um I don't really talk about games, like my games specifically, on anywhere at the moment. So I'm trying to get that sorted away. But I'm also like just in the process of like looking for a job in the meantime, like outside the industry. So I've been like working on like a different resume for that. But Eventually, my LinkedIn, if I ever get to using it, will be on that. But I'll definitely at least keep posting updates on my website. If I change the link, I'll let you guys know because I'm not sure if I'll keep using like the custom one or if I'll just like end up using like Squarespace or something.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, that sounds great. It sounds wonderful. Again, thank you so much. Takes a lot to come out here, so I fully respect you for that. And I hope you have a great day. If you have anything else to
Yeah, you
say, feel
too.
free.
And thank you to everyone who listened or is listening in the future.
Yes. Thank you guys so much. And I'm just going to. There we go. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. That's all.